Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Advocacy Day training webinar. We're going to start off quickly with just a little video that's going to give you sort of a visual and audio for what the day is going to look like. And then I will pass it off to our Executive Director of Michigan College Access Network, Ryan Funes-Bliss.
Advocacy Day is when people who work with students meet with our legislators and talk to them about who our students are and what they need and what legislators can do to help us do our jobs better.
We have to invest in the programs and the work that is having impact and doing good.
The issues that we're seeing and facing require really creative solutions.
We have a diverse array of constituents here, folks able to meet with their local representatives, which I think adds to the value of those conversations.
It takes money, it takes resources, it takes connection. In being able to connect with policy is really where the magic happens.
Coming here and actually meeting with legislators and talking to them about what my students need, it's powerful.
MCAN has provided a unified front for our institutions under one banner.
It's important to see that we're all part of a bigger initiative and we all want the same things.
Right. Ryan Funes-Bliss. Let's get it started.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to have you all here. We're so excited about the event coming up next week. We've got more people and more meetings and just more activity and more action than ever before. This event continues to grow, including growing in partnerships and growing in people. So it tells us we're on the right track. It tells us this is something you all are interested in and want to do. And we know it is something you need to do as we talk to our legislator friends who really need to know what's happening on the ground and don't technically and typically know until someone like you tells them. So happy to be here again. Ryan Funes-Bliss, Executive Director at MCAN. You've heard from my colleague Maura, who is our director of the newly created department at MCAN called Network Engagement and Events. She is responsible for all of our events. So if you love the stuff, tell her. And if you hate the stuff, she probably doesn't want to hear that. No, she definitely wants to hear that because she takes your feedback very seriously. We also have our friends that we've been working with, frankly, for years on this and many other projects from PPA, Public Policy Associates, Dan Quinn and Maddie Thomas. Welcome. And new to our show today is Magnus Noble, who is a Midwest Policy Fellow from our partners at the National College Attainment Network, NCAN. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about federal things, and he'll be at the event. And again, we're focused on state here, but it's helpful to know or hear what's happening at the federal level, especially nowadays when it's really hard to track that stuff yourself. I want to give a big shout out to our Advocacy Day partners. As I have mentioned, these have grown over the years. It is really nice to work with these 6 organizations who share our mission and our values. And instead of having 7 different advocacy days and coming to legislators and saying the same things, we're leveraging our collective power together, which I think is just a really smart thing to do. So welcome to our friends from MACAC, our friends from Macro, our Promise Zones as part of the Michigan Promise Zones Association, some of our federal programs with MyCap, our financial aid friends with MISFA, and our friends new to the partnership One Goal, who are doing some phenomenal work in Southeast Michigan and elsewhere around the state and are looking to grow their impact. So if you are a member of one of these organizations and you were recruited by these organizations, welcome. We are expecting you. We have materials for you. Just like the folks who MCAN has recruited, we will have all the things you need to be really successful and, dare I say, have a little bit of fun on Advocacy Day next week. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Maura, who's going to talk about some of the logistics of the day so you know what things look like.
Thanks, Ryan. So Advocacy Day is this coming Thursday, a week from today, March 5th. Hopefully you have that on your calendar. We are going to be located in the same building as the last 2 years if you are a returner. We're in the Phoenix building right next to the MCAN offices. Parking is going to be available to you in the North Grand Ramp. You should have already received all of this email or all of this information via email. You will receive it again via email next week. We will provide parking validations for you, and the parking ramp is actually just like 1 block, or really more like a half of a block from where we'll be headquartered for the day at the Phoenix building. So you can, when you get that validation or when you get that ticket coming in, you can just leave it in your car, and we'll hand you a validation at registration, and you'll be all set for the day. The agenda, you'll notice the start time is a bit earlier this year, and I know there are all kinds of mixed feelings about that. For me, certainly. We did this so that everybody with those 9:30 and 10 a.m. meetings, which will be many of you, has a chance to like really feel settled. We can get through all of the logistics that we need to first thing in the morning, and you can have an opportunity to kind of gather yourself, gather your team, and then make your way to those very first meetings of the day, hopefully helping everybody feel really prepared and confident. So check-in and registration open at 8 a.m. We will have breakfast for everybody available. We will start the program at 8:30 a.m. and we have Janeth Johnson-Smith, who's coming to us from California in Green Dot Public Schools as a guest speaker. You'll hear from Ryan a little bit more on our priorities and the reasons behind Advocacy Day and why we're there. And then your meetings will kick off starting right at 9:30 a.m. And beyond throughout the day. Lunch will be available back at the headquarters at that Phoenix building from noon to 2 p.m. And we also have a special little afternoon pick-me-up coffee coming in from 11 to 1. So get your morning coffee. We will have morning coffee too from the caterer, but know that you can get a little specialty drink after that, first or second meeting of the day too. I am going to pass it back off to Ryan, who's going to talk about our priorities for this year.
Thanks, Maura. We have several policy priorities that we are providing you information on. These are the things that MCAN is advocating for in budget year 26-27. They do not have to be the things you advocate for, but if you show up and you say, what am I supposed to say? We're going to give you this information because you can say these things. If you are a member of any of the other groups, you may have other talking points. Please feel free to use those. You might have talking points from your district, from your building, from your community, from your college. Again, we don't presuppose that you should be saying all of these things, but certainly these are safe things to say. I want to make really clear the reason why we do this training and why we talk about this stuff. It is not because we think you all can't do this. It is because we know you all can do this. We have seen your colleagues do this year after year, and we hear over and over and over again, both from participants and from legislators, that this is a very impactful and meaningful thing. And so we want to make sure you feel the most comfortable, the most ready that you possibly can to go in and share your thoughts and hopes and dreams with your legislators. We want to make sure you don't feel like you don't know what you're saying. Having been in that position once or twice in my life, it's not fun. So we want to make sure you've got all the tools that you can possibly use. So MCAN will be focusing over the next budget cycle on these 5 priorities. No doubt other things will come up. Certainly we'll be cheering on K-12 school funding and higher ed funding. So there's more sort of on the outside of this, but some of the core impactful things we're talking about. Number 1 is the MCAN state appropriation. If you followed the budget last year, MCAN moved from $4 million to $3 million. If you can imagine cutting 25% of your budget, very impactful over the last year. I hesitate to complain too much because many of our friends were cut completely out of the budget, so we're thankful that we were included at all. But we'd like to get back to where we were in fiscal year 24, which is a full $5 million. And frankly, most of that money gets poured back into you all in your school districts for grants, in your LCANs, in your adult ed programs, in your educated workforce programs with advisors and coaches. and other grant making student success programs. So we want to get back up to that level to be able to do more and give you more to do the great things you're doing. Obviously, that's very self-centered on MCAN, but the more of you who say that and can talk about the value we hope we are bringing to you, the more impactful that is. Reforming the state dual enrollment policy. I hope you all have seen what we have put out with Launch Michigan and Michigan Community College Association. The three of us have sort of banded together around some changes to dual enrollment, changing the funding mechanism, changing some eligibility pieces, changing some of the things that act as barriers, not just to students and families, but barriers to K-12 school districts to providing high quality dual enrollment. We are really excited about those policy ideas. Michigan Community College Association is as well, Launch Michigan is as well, and many legislators are. So if you do talk about dual enrollment, which I would highly suggest you do, your legislators will be familiar with this. They will have heard about this already. We're also advocating to permanently reduce the age of eligibility for the Michigan Reconnect program from 25 to 21. If you recall, back in 23, 24, there was some federal money from ARPA that allowed us to temporarily reduce to 21. I think something like 30,000 21 to 24-year-olds got into the program at that time. It is a very cost-effective and successful strategy. There is a bill waiting for a vote on this in the House, I believe, right now. And so it's sort of primed to move if we can push our legislators to show that this is good policy. We want to fully fund and strengthen the Michigan Achievement Scholarship and the Community College Guarantee. I know some of our MISFA friends have lots of thoughts on how we can make this better, and I encourage you to tell that to your legislators. Some of the things that we want, number one, is to make sure we're depositing that money, that the plan calls for at least $50 million every year, 4 or 5 years, to get us up to about the $560 million ongoing investment in order to keep Michigan Achievement and Community College Guarantee moving forward. The governor's budget she proposed a couple of weeks ago does that, which we're excited about. But we want to make sure those things are kept safe. And then we're advocating for a couple of tweaks: a higher student aid index number, 24 months instead of 15 months to cash in and activate your scholarship. Some small things like that that we know will allow more people to access the funds. And we know that there are funding mechanisms built in that this wouldn't require more money. And then finally, we're working with our friends over at MyLeap to permanently coordinate and modernize the transfer system. So a couple of years ago, we worked with some legislators to put some money in the budget around transfer, specifically for our friends at MyLeap, to build out some staffing and some ideas. Again, not to take over transfer in the state. They don't really have that authority, and they're not looking to do that, but some coordination, some support from the state to all of our community and tribal colleges and all of our four-year institutions who are sort of doing this one by one, agreement by agreement, which makes it very, very difficult. So we'd like to make sure that that transfer work sticks in MyLeap and stays there on a permanent basis. So we'll be advocating for investment there. We don't have time for questions here, but of course you can drop questions in the chat and I will spend time in the chat answering them. Again, you don't have to say these 5 things, but if you're looking for something to say, we highly suggest you do. I'd look in the chat right now. We just dropped the priorities in a written form, and you'll see the partner priorities here as well. So if you want to look at those, we don't have time, unfortunately, to go over each of those, but they are just as important as the 5 that I outlined here. Again, if you have questions, concerns, and if you're like, Ryan, that's not the right way to go, I want to hear that too. Give me a call, send me a text, send me an email, or we can talk in the chat, because I'm going to turn it over to my friends Dan and Maddie to tell you a little bit more about advocacy. Again, thanks for being here.
I'm just going to say welcome on behalf of Public Policy Associates. This is our 6th year. I was actually going through my notes here before the webinar. I started off with my then CEO, Sam Singh, who is one of the advocacy participants because he is now Senator Sam Singh, representing the 28th Senate District in Michigan. So we started off doing this virtually in 2021 and then in person since. And it's one of our go-to events, things that we look forward to at PPA in terms of supporting you all, in terms of your advocacy day and sharing your subject matter expertise with the legislators. And with me is Maddie Thomas. If you want to introduce yourself, Maddie.
Hi, I'm Maddie Thomas. This is my second year assisting MCAN with their advocacy day. Very excited to meet you all next week and talk to you about your experience. I spent some time working in the legislature, so I kind of have some background knowledge of what that process looks like behind the scenes. So happy to be here and get you all fired up for advocacy day. Back to you, Dan.
Thanks. And it's just that kind of process that we want to try and bring to the table as a value add to our partners at MCAN is the fact that I have done the advocacy like you have in person, and Maddie has done it on the receiving end here in terms of working with legislators and scheduling and working through talking points and responding to letters from constituents like yourself. So we're going to start with kind of like what is advocacy, and we've got a couple different slides here in terms of like the power that you have as an advocate coming in to talk about your profession, your students, whether they're high school students or whether they're college students or they're non-traditional students who are coming back, into the college, I guess, environment. Our job here next week is to share information. If we kind of put it all down to kind of like a simplistic term here. And we're sharing information both with our colleagues, that are going to be at Advocacy Day, and also bringing home information that you learn while you are in Lansing to share amongst your constituents, your coworkers that you're working with. You're going to work with your colleagues, both within your own environment, but also across some of the organizations. So when you get paired up with people from different organizations to go to the individual offices, you're collectively sharing the story of college access here in Michigan. You're collaborating with your colleagues to identify opportunities, both during the day and then also for extensions of Advocacy Day, because advocacy does not stop on March 5th. It continues on year round. And you're going to be advocating for resources, including financial support, human and other resources that are going to help your students. You're really, at the end of the day, you're representing your profession, as an advocate for your profession. Next slide. And really, this is I think this is the most important piece here is that, the power of a citizen advocate is what you're bringing to the table. The legislators who are in the Senate and House office buildings hear from people that are professional lobbyists all day long. They hear from advocates like Ryan who are, running organizations all day. But they don't get to hear from people like you all the time. And I think that really amplifies the message. It's one thing for, the Michigan College Access Network to talk about funding that they need to be able to, support the network. It's another thing for you to talk about what the network does to support you as you're advocating for your students, as you're working with your students. You are the boots on the ground. You see the struggles with FAFSA. You see the triumphs and the tribulations, of first generation graduates, and the barriers that all of your students face. The goal that you have next week is to really take your experience and humanize it, and make them understand what it's like to be a counselor at a college or a university or at a high school, and how the policies that they're enacting affect you. I'm going to turn it over to Maddie then at this point.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. So just to reiterate what Dan said, advocacy is far more than a simple conversation. You're the folks on the ground that are really understanding what students are going through as they're working to achieve post-secondary success. And the legislators do want to hear from you and your voice. I'm on page. Sorry, my phone just rang. I don't know if you heard that. But they're the folks that want to hear you. The legislators want to hear you and your voice, and it's extremely powerful when you come in and speak to them. So if you want to go to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about what that conversation actually looks like. It's going to Oh yeah, this one, perfect. So, first of all, you're going to be directly engaging with a legislator or a member of their staff. If you do get a staff member, don't be discouraged. Sometimes those folks are just as important as the legislator themselves when it comes to getting things done in both the House and the Senate. You're really going to be using your collective voice to advocate for those priorities. Sometimes things are stronger in numbers, and having many folks in and out of different meetings during the advocacy day is really, really important to show the collective strength of MCAN, college access at large. Um, this day is open to all who are passionate about expanding educational opportunities. So you're going to get to also meet all sorts of different people that approach college access in a different way, but we're really under that same um, goal of 60 by 30, getting students the support and access that they deserve. So with that, we're gonna go a little bit more into a Civics 101. Mara, if you want to switch the slide, just to kind of give you what the landscape is in Lansing to understand what kind of environment you're going to be working with. So you can go ahead to the next one. So just a quick rundown for you all. The Michigan legislature functions very similar to the federal legislature for those that are familiar. We're a bicameral system. There's a House and the Senate. Almost identical to the federal government. We have a full-time legislature, which is unique for Michigan. Our legislators are there year-round working on behalf of their constituents. And this is ideally their only full-time job. So they're here to talk to you and meet with you and make sure their needs are met. Your needs are met as community members. Michigan has 2-year session cycles. So we're currently in year 2 of the 103rd legislature. So bills that were introduced in 2025 can still be voted on and go through the process in 2026. Here on the slide, we have the key players. The House, there's about 110 representatives. The Senate's got 38. And we've got a divided government at the moment. So the House is governed by a Republican majority, where the Senate is governed by a Senate majority. But those majorities are very, very slim. So it's really, really important for most members to be engaged and active in their communities, because that, majority could slip at any point, and we have an election coming up too. So it's just a very interesting dynamic currently going on in the state. How a bill becomes a law is, taking us back to that famous cartoon with the singing bill. But bills are introduced, they're assigned a number. HB for House, SB for Senate. Most bills will then go, well, all bills will then go to a committee. Well, most bills, that's kind of where those bills stop seeing any action. So, there's many, many bills, probably thousands that are introduced every year, every session cycle, but only a small number of them actually get to the committee process. Then an even smaller amount actually get into law. And that's a really important piece of what you guys are going to be doing on Advocacy Day is kind of maybe pushing some of those priorities that are in the introduction phase, but haven't been introduced in committee, getting those hearings established. Once they get to the committee, they're going to go through the committee process. Then they'll go back to the other side of the legislature. So if it's introduced in the House, then it's going to go to the Senate or vice versa. And then once bills are agreed upon by both chambers, then they go to the governor for signature. She has some veto power, 14 days to sign a bill, and then veto it if she decides she doesn't want to proceed for whatever reason. But that's kind of the general process, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. We can go ahead to the next slide. It's just another visual of kind of how bill becomes a law. And I just want to touch on, before I hand it back over to Dan, that, laws start with ideas, and those ideas come from people like you. So, MCAN has ideas of how they think the government should work to support students in post-secondary education, and you folks have ideas too. So those bills start from people like you having conversations like you're going to have next week. So don't feel like it's an elusive process. This is how government happens every day, with people like you bringing up issues that are important to them. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Dan to talk about the budget process.
Great, thank you. So, as Maddie was talking about, that's the policy side of how policies in Lansing get I guess impacted by the discussions that you're going to have. On the other side, this is dealing with the allocation, so the money side. So when MCAN is looking to support their network with a state allocation, it's coming through the budget process, which will be kind of ongoing throughout the year. On the slide here, you can see kind of it's a circular flow, and I would describe it as a continuous process that happens. The budget process this year actually wrapped up, after October 1st. So as we go through some of the dates on the next slide, which meant that the budget process for 2027 was actually already started as they were wrapping up the budget for 2026. And most of the schools in the state had already started their budgets in June, going through with that. In terms of how the budget process works here, it goes on a pretty regular cadence, and this is actually how it's supposed to work. So early in January, there's what's called a consensus revenue estimating conference, and that's where the economists of the state get together and they figure out how much money the state has, and that really sets kind of like what can the state spend during the fiscal year for 2027, which is started in October of 2026 and goes to September 30th of 2027. From there, this year there was an executive budget recommendation that occurred on February 11th. And the governor essentially took all of her department, I guess, input from all of the department heads, identified what each one of them needs to be able to run for the year, and then worked with constituency groups and other areas to identify other spending priorities that the governor has. And the governor proposes a budget. But this is kind of the key distinction here, that even though the governor proposes the budget, it is actually the legislature that appropriates the budget. They're the ones who actually get to determine the final features of what it looks like. And it's a big negotiation. And part of the negotiation happened last night. So Governor Whitmer held her 8th State of the State speech last night, where she outlined not only the executive budget recommendations, but also policy priorities that she has for the next year. And she's got about 10 months in her term to get as much done as she possibly can. From there, and this is where we're going to hit, and this is why March is so important, this is when the legislative budgets are supposed to start landing. And there's a committee for just about there is a committee for every department within the state government, and also with every policy priority. So there is a higher education and community college committee. There is a K-12 education and workforce committee, in both houses. And those I guess processes are kind of starting to move right now. It is probably expected between now and spring break, but during the month of March, that the Senate, which is controlled by the Democrats, will likely go through their normal budget process, and their committees will then release their individual budgets, and then they will pass a omnibus budget that will have kind of two pieces to it, which will be general fund spending and then school aid fund spending that they'll have. And then that is supposed to happen in the House, and it is expected that it will happen kind of in that same parallel. Last year, the House never released their budgets until I think it was the end of June, and it took them until October 2nd to basically share all of that information. The budget process in Michigan, has a recommendation, but not a requirement, that they pass a budget before July 1st, and that's to align with school districts who are going to be spending their money, because they have a requirement to have a balanced budget on hand before June 30th of their fiscal year. And then the state budget starts in October, and at that point, we'll be starting the fiscal year 2028 budget at that point in time.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, I'm gonna give you some inside look for those that are new to MCAN Advocacy Day and a refresher for those who have done it before of what your meeting will actually look like. If you want to go to the next slide. So when you're gonna go to the Phoenix building in the morning to get all of our logistics and whatnot from the fabulous NCAM team, but then you will at some point be heading over to either the Senate building, the House building, or the Capitol building for your meetings. The first thing you're going to need to do when you enter any of the buildings is have a state issued ID. You're going to have to go through a metal detector and a bag check if you enter through the Capitol building. And those are folks that are in leadership positions on either the House or Senate side, and those will be indicated. Once you enter the office, once you enter the building, you will go to the office floor. The folks in the building that work in the building are typically able to kind of direct you if you have questions. They're used to people not really knowing where to go, so don't feel like you're an outsider if you're like kind of unsure of where the elevator is or whatnot. But once you get to the office, you will enter at the time of your appointment. If the door is locked, you can go ahead and knock. If the door is open, you can feel free to just open the door. Those offices are meant for people to engage with their legislators in, so don't feel like you're barging in if it kind of seems dark and scary in there. You're free to enter. Normally there will be a front desk person. The offices are pretty small, but there'll be a person at the front desk who will greet you, or there might be maybe an intern off to the side that's there to greet you, or the legislator will be kind of mingling in the front of the office to greet you. And then they'll normally take you back to kind of the back part of the office building to actually have the conversation and sit at a little table. You may be meeting with a staff member, like I said before, but don't be discouraged if that is the case. Sometimes those folks are real movers and shakers within their own office. So do not be discouraged. Dan?
Yeah, and
Over to you.
especially to reiterate what Maddie just said, like on the Senate side, many of their legislative staffers have been there for probably 8, 10, 15 years, and they have more experience than the legislators do. So in some of the cases that you're working with. Before I jump into the slide here, just a heads up that Maura has reminded me that there will be a guide to your legislative meeting that will be part of your app, and that all of your meetings will only be viewable on the app itself. So you'll have to sign up through that. It is a third-party app that they will be using, and it will be where you can do all of your feedback and some of the other components of this. And it will have room numbers and who's in your group and all of that stuff within the app. Anything that you want to add more about the app before I slide into the directions here?
No, I think that's great. Thanks, Dan. Everybody should have gotten that email already. If you haven't, don't panic. There's still time. The meetings may not be viewable yet in your app. That is okay. We don't expect them to be viewable, but that schedule will be uploaded in the app only. So please make sure that you have the app downloaded before the day of. Sorry, I said I didn't have anything to add and then I went ahead anyway. All
That's
right, great.
okay.
Let's hear about the meetings. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, and the app is pretty slick too. It'll give you literally all of your information that you need for the day, and then you provide feedback in other areas too. But the meetings themselves are actually going to happen pretty quickly. You may have like a half-hour schedule, but you really have about 15 minutes. That you're going to be meeting with the legislator or their staffer, and it's going to go by really quickly, and sometimes it goes by too quickly. And that's where I just want to give a little bit of a tip that's not on the slide here, that when you're with a group of people and you have multiple constituencies like in the room, so if you have K-12 and higher ed folks and people who are advocating for priorities that are nonprofit or other areas, be mindful of that so that everybody has a little bit of a chance to speak. It's okay to kind of like make sure that you kind of police yourself in terms of the time. You have about 3 minutes or so to kind of do your introductions. They really value those of you who are living in the district or working in your district. So really identify and lift up, if you're from a district and let's say Garden City, Michigan is part of that, and lean in on that your representative is from the area that you work or the area that you live. Do a little bit of research too, because you can find out some background information about where they went to high school, whether they're from the area. And then that leads into the why. And really, this is kind of that short story that you need to have ready to talk about why this policy or this program affects you and or your students. And then also, be specific. As you leave the meeting, you're going to want to have them take an action of some kind. So having an ask towards the end of the meeting is kind of a customary approach here. Like, will you support this or something along those lines, or do you support this is a key question to understand, especially if you don't understand where they're coming from or if they would be willing to support it. And then, leave a few minutes at the end to kind of, let them ask some questions or do some follow-up. This is also, the time where you want to bring your business cards so you can drop your business cards with them. This is where you also want to, leave your leave behinds. So if you have your own priorities that are in addition to the MCAN priorities, this is where you probably want to have that leave behind, where you can say, well, I didn't get a chance to talk about this program, but I'm really interested in following up with this information. And then that gives you some opportunity to do so and exchange emails if needed with their staffer. Turn it back over to Maddie now to talk about some tips for success here.
Yeah, just a couple more points for successful legislative meetings. Like Dan said, there's a lot of people in the room and the legislator is normally running from one thing to another. So, brevity is key. You can always follow up with them. So if you don't, necessarily get to give your entire pitch or your entire, background of why you care about one thing or another, like it's okay, just, prepare enough to have that kind of one couple sentences maybe that are going to stick with them. And don't be too upset if the legislator seems a little frazzled. They typically are because they have very busy lives. And the next thing I would add, these legislators are, they represent a political party, but it's best to maybe stay nonpartisan as you can. I know everything feels politicized in this current environment, but try to maybe stay away from those things that are a little bit more partisan charged, just to kind of avoid any uncomfortable conversations with your legislators. If those come up, they might, but maybe kind of stick to some more nonpartisan talking points, talk about the students, the value that college has on them, and just know that everyone has an opinion on education in Michigan because education touches everyone. So, there could be some curveballs thrown in, but just try to stay, as nonpartisan as you can. And lastly, if you don't have the answer to something, or if they ask a specific follow-up question, don't be afraid to say, I'm not really sure. Happy to follow up with you one-on-one in the future or over email to get more specific clarity on your question. With that, I will pass it back to Dan to talk a little bit about that pushback piece if it does occur. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, and this is where I get most of my questions about people going into offices of what happens if they tell me, they don't like what I'm talking about, or if they don't believe in what I'm talking about. And being prepared for that pushback is probably the best thing that you can have, is that there will probably be some, maybe not overt opposition to it, or maybe more likely some skepticism. And it can be uncomfortable when someone, questions, a value or something that you're asking for. Each one of you that is coming to this, event is bringing your own personal, I guess, advocacy for the students that you're serving at your institutions. The interest here, or the goal here, is to try and flip that pushback, if there is pushback, and turn it into kind of like a follow-up. So Maddie on the previous slide talked a little bit about, this idea of like, if you don't know a number, tell them you'll get back to them on that. So if it's something that you don't have an answer to, or something that wasn't, kind of in your wheelhouse, that you were expecting to answer, just kind of take a note, and then it's okay to do some research, and then send them a follow-up email from that. One of the, going back to the slide here, is, even before we get to like pushback, you may get questions that are unrelated to what you're talking about. So it may not necessarily be pushback, but it could be something to the effect of, a new program that they, may have heard about, or something that relates to like literacy, or it could be something that relates to like school choice, or we've heard it all over the last couple of years. And the same advice here for that Maddie gave, this concept of staying kind of positive is there, and just say, that's not one of the areas that I work with, but I can go back to MCAN, and we can come back and maybe talk about how to answer that question. They may ask a question about something like vouchers, or something that may not necessarily directly relate to what you're talking about. You just kind of attempt to move on to a different topic, and get back to your script as quickly as possible, if at all possible. And now, kind of just talking about kind of the conclusion. So throughout the day, you'll have a couple of meetings scheduled, and then you'll have an opportunity to come back to the Phoenix building. And PPA, both Maddie and I, and our colleague Scott, will be in the room, just off to the side of the main area, and we'll be there to debrief. We will collect stories from you in terms of important notes. We'll help you write your note back to the legislator, and then we'll actually collect all of those notes, during that time period, and make sure that they get mailed out, or delivered to the appropriate office buildings. And then the other piece too is, this is kind of an eventful day, that you can share your story, both while it's happening, and then also after. A lot of the pictures that you see throughout this slide deck are people that have shared their event details on social media. You can tag your legislators as well. Almost all of the legislative offices have a social media link. Most of them are on X/Twitter. A lot of them now are also on Instagram, and then also LinkedIn, if you feel comfortable doing it on a professional network like that. So we'll be there, and then we'll also be instructing you to take your post-event survey, which will also be on the app during that time period when you have a debrief. And we'll be there to offer some tips and tricks. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Magnus, who's going to talk about the national, focus of advocacy.
So glad to be with you. I may have met some of you at the conference in November, if I'm getting my months remembered correctly. So as Ryan said, I work for the National College Attainment Network as a Midwest Policy Fellow. My work is focused on supporting 3 key states in the Midwest. One of them is Michigan, who our biggest partner, of course, is MCAN. And as part of that work, I'll be attending the Advocacy Day next week. While typically my work focuses on state policy, I will be there to help field any questions on federal policy, because as we talk about state policy, sometimes federal policy ideas come into your mind, and what's going on with the FAFSA, what's going on with Pell Grants, all of these sorts of things. So I encourage all of you, if you have questions about federal policy, to go ahead and drop those in the chat or in the Q&A function, and come visit me next week during Advocacy Day. I'll be around to follow up with you on those questions, to answer those questions for you. So keep that in mind. But of course, as you all know, as Ryan said, as Dan and Maddie have been talking about, you're meeting with your state legislators. So there are specific state questions, specific state asks that you'll have next week. But if you have anything on your mind about federal policy, if there are questions that you have that come up, please feel free to talk with me. I'm happy to do that. If I know Workforce Pell is a big issue right now, so if you're working on trying to figure out how your organization will interact with Workforce Pell, or if you have feedback about the changes that have been made to the FAFSA recently, which I think are fantastic, please let me know. Or if your organization, in addition to engaging at the state level, also engages at the federal level, I would love to speak with you. I'm also happy to share my email address if that's helpful. I'll leave that up to the MCAN team to determine that. But like I said, please share any questions that you might have. I'm there to help. I'm there to support the MCAN team and to support all of you. Being involved with your state legislators is a really big deal, and it's so important for them to hear your stories. So that's all I have for now. If there are any specific questions, please just let me know.
Thanks so much, Magnus. We really appreciate you being here, both for our conference in November. You were correct. And also with us next week. We are very lucky to have such a strong partnership with NCAN. Like Magnus said, please feel free to drop some Q&A for him in the chat. And then that way he can go back and make sure that he's like grabbing all of the newest and latest information for you, and then follow up with him at Advocacy Day. He'll be at a table right up front with a nice sign there so that you can easily find him, and he's happy to answer your questions. Uh, with that, I will say that we are now going to open up for open Q&A. We do have some previously submitted questions. Before we answer anything live, I would just like to note the contact information for Advocacy Day on the screen, advocacy@micollegeaccess.org. If you have changes to attendance, questions about logistics, questions about meetings, please reach out to us there. We have a few different people monitoring that inbox, and so you'll get an answer pretty quickly. And then with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share, as well as invite some of our panelists to unmute. And I'm going to pull up some of these questions here. We had a question early on from, let me find that, Annie Brees, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, who's advocating for funding of the Michigan Achievement Scholarship. And Annie is wondering, are there any particular questions that she should expect about her school from her legislators? Any particular numbers to know beforehand? Ryan, maybe you can talk a little bit about what is in attendee packets as well as legislator packets.
Thanks, Maura, thanks for the question. You will have a great packet full of resources, including data specific to that legislator's district, college access and success measures. You will have other data that is available for their district and for the state to provide to them. So that will give you sort of some grist to provide them to talk about. Oftentimes I start with that because it's so particular to the legislator. They sort of like it. It's about them. It's about their district. And they get to think about their people. So like I said, I often open with the data. My recommendation to you all is to identify the party of the folks that you're talking to, whether they're a Republican or a Democrat. And there are some particular things that I have found they often ask me about. If you are meeting with some of our Republican friends, they often bring up CTE programs. So if you're from a school, or hopefully some of you are from a CTE program or a center, a career tech center, having some information about that. And, we like to talk about the articulated credit students earn and how that launches you into post-secondary education. They often ask about dual enrollment, and I think that's because of some of the back end stuff that we've been doing with them. Very supportive of that. They often ask about apprenticeships in trade schools, and I think this is a place where there is a lot of confusion and misunderstanding. Michigan does not have a large section of trade schools. Our community colleges are our trade schools. And so if folks are looking for a welding certificate or something like that, the best place for them to go typically is their local community college. They can use the community college guarantee and get it free or almost free. and they'll have a piece of paper from an accredited institution. There are some mom and pop shops out there. We have found that they are often more expensive than the local community college, and that they often don't produce the certificate or degree that has the same value in the marketplace. So those are some of the talking points that we use with our Republican friends. Our Democratic friends are still talking about equity. They still want to know about students of color, low-income students, first-gen college-going students. Some of them will ask about men and boys because we know that that is another place where we're lacking in the state. Having disaggregated data by those markers can be very helpful. Some of that you can get on our impact map. You don't even have to worry about it. You can print it off and have it with you if you want to have it with you. Some of you may have data back at your home office that you want to run. Those are some of the things that I would recommend. But I want to give a huge caveat to this is like, don't panic if you're thinking, where am I going to get this data and how am I going to get this data? If you have access to these things in your district, in your community, in your college, wherever you're sitting, super great. If you don't go panic and run to try to find it. We will provide you enough data for you to be able to answer most questions, and anything that's hanging out there, you can always use the magic words. We will get back to you on that. When you come back and debrief with our team, say, Senator McBroom wanted to know how many CTE students from his district are going from CTE into post-secondary. We will dig that data up for you. We will get it to you so you can respond to the legislator and keep that relationship going, but we've got your back on that.
Thanks, Ryan. Sarah had a couple of great questions. The first was, will we know in advance if we're going into the meeting with a group of other educators slash nonprofits? On the app, you will see your meeting. You will see all of the other attendees in the organization that they represent as well. So you should be able to get a good feel for the makeup of your meeting group prior to showing up for the meeting. And then, second, Sarah also asked about preferences for meeting with representatives from certain areas versus others. You know, typically people would hope to meet with legislators who represent themselves. Ryan, could you talk a bit about how we create this meeting schedule? And I will say that if you have flagged preferences on the registration or to us in an email, we certainly always try to accommodate those. And then I'm going to let Ryan fill in with a bit more information on this as well.
Yeah, I think we took some photos of this year, so I'd love to share them with you all. This is a massive effort, and I just give such a shout out to our team, to our friends at PPA for helping this. We've got a big board that's divided up by district, and then we've got you all where you've identified where you live, where you work, counties that you have a presence in and could talk to, and we map it out and we move the stickies back and forth to make sure no meeting has too many people or too few people. You will most likely be in at least one meeting with a senator or a House member where you live and or work. That was the primary number that we used to move you. If you are in the city of Detroit, there are a ton of folks who all have a single senator or two senators or three senators. So you may not be meeting with that senator just because we can't have 20 people in a meeting. There's just no physical space for that. So we try to limit meetings to 5. So we have mapped that all out. If you indicated you serve a county, you touch a county, you've driven through a county, I'm just kidding, but we've tried to place you in very strategic places so that it makes sense. If you are a statewide entity, you may be placed with someone in the UP because we have fewer participants from the UP, but you're statewide, so you can talk about what's happening in the UP with your organization. If anybody has any red flags about that, let me know. But again, this is all based on the information you provided. If you get your schedule and you're like, Ryan, what the heck am I doing meeting with Senator Anthony? I don't understand that connection. Give me a call, give me a text, give me a shout out somehow, and I'll be able to answer that question for you. We believe we have not placed any of you in a Senate or House district where you have no connection. We believe that to be true. You may get your schedule and say, I'm going to argue with you, Ryan, and I will believe you. But we have taken great pains. I would say 2 full days of multiple full-time equivalent employees to make sure this works for you. And I say that, and I want to give so much thrust to it because I want you to know we incredibly care about you and your ability to have impact and your ability to be comfortable in these meetings. So we've tried to make it make the most sense so that you are not someone living in the urban city of Detroit and meeting with someone who represents Sault Ste. Marie. That doesn't make sense. So we believe that we have done that. Again, we're humans, and this is a massive undertaking. There's almost 200 people coming to this event. So should you find a mistake, flag it, and we will make it right. Did I
Thanks,
miss any part of
Ryan.
that question, Maura?
No, that was excellent. Follow up. When is the schedule going live?
Yeah, someone did ask this privately in the chat too. Such a great question. I can tell you right now, in this moment, we have another staff member who is working diligently. We have your schedule, but to put it in a place so that we can give it to the app to upload and get to you. So I believe, and please give me a little bit of grace if we don't meet this, but I believe we will be able to send the spreadsheet to the app today with your schedules. What I don't know is how long it takes for them to upload into their system. What I do know is that once we get the approval that it is up and ready, we will send you all an email saying schedules are live. Go check it out. Give us feedback if you have any. Uh, be very, very helpful. What I will say, one more thing about the appointments is uh, we have also placed you in places where we need you. So it would be great if you all were like, yes, I tangentially have a relationship with this district. I see why they put me here. I'm going to be a utility player here and go meet this person who's not my primary person I want to meet. If you can give us that support and that grace, that's helpful. We have several districts where nobody who lives or works directly in that district registered, so we had to pull in other people again. That made sense. Again, we didn't do that for anybody who said, I don't want to do that. But I really appreciate your all flexibility to know we've placed you places very, very strategically and purposefully.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. I thought that Courtney's question to the hosts and panelists about youth attending, because we do have a pretty large number of students attending, her question was great, and she was wondering about IDs. So if you're bringing students who are under the age of 16, what do they do? Ryan?
Yes, that was a great question, Courtney. While we were on the webinar, I had our office manager call and find out the answer to this question. If you are under 18, you do not need an ID, which is something I did not know. But obviously, security will ask why you're there. But most of our young people will be with people above the age of 18, so I believe they will receive no hassle. If you've ever met the security at the House and the Senate buildings, they are lovely, lovely people. I've never had any problem with them. So if anything, they'll engage your young person in a conversation. So new hot off the press for me at least. You don't need ID if you're under 18. If you have it, it doesn't hurt to bring it. But if you're too young to have a driver's license, they will allow you up just by saying what you're here to do.
Awesome. Let's see. Let me just make sure. I think we have a few more open questions. All right. If we represent a specific university or organization, should we bring swag items or no swag? Thoughts?
Swag all day, all the swag. Legislators love gifts. If when you go into their office, you'll see the things they have on their walls. They may have something from your institution already. Uh, keep it low cost, right? These aren't crystal orbs. If you have like a teddy bear with your college sweatshirt on, and this includes high schools if you have swag too. I would estimate to say keep it under $25. There's all sorts of rules, but if you keep it cheap, you won't break any rules there. But they do love swag. So staff love swag too from the district. So I encourage you to do all of those things.
And feel free to wear something too that says your university or
Yeah.
your school on it. You saw in the video that there were a few folks like from Wayne State that had lapel pins. Go right ahead. Shout out to Wayne State.
Yeah, and this is that was very, very smooth, Dan. This is a great sort of lead in to some of the things that you'll receive in addition to your folder of materials. You will get a 60 by 30 pin, an MCAN 60 by 30 pin. So Don't worry if you don't have a pin already. We will get you one of those. You'll have that at your seat. Additionally, somebody asked earlier about providing their own stationery. I know I'm going to get made fun of for calling it stationery. Their own note cards for sending feedback to the legislators that they have met with. We have MCAN branded stationery for you to use, but please, 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 if you have your own, we highly encourage you to bring that along and you can write your thank you notes on that. It is your voice, anything that you can do to make this personal is that much more impactful.
And bring your business cards.
Oh, yes. Just one more thing. Let's see here. We are past our ending time. Just a reminder that this is being recorded. We will send out a recording. So if you have a colleague or somebody else that's coming along that wasn't able to be here today, we will get you a recording of this. It will go out to all registered attendees. And last question, because I think it may allow you, Ryan, to highlight some of our resources. Dr. Miller asks, is completion data available for the 30,000 21 to 23-year-olds who completed a degree, certificate, or certification during the period where Michigan Reconnect eligibility was expanded?
Yeah, that's a great question from Tracy. And my response is unfortunately not yet because this data lags. Oftentimes we look at this data in 6-year chunks and then it takes the state time to process that. We don't have that data yet. Hopefully we will have some early indicator data, certificates and associate's degrees we can typically get sooner, but it's still pretty far out for that. So at this point, we're looking at enrollment data, so we know they enrolled. We will be watching for retention and persistence data that the state will be collecting on these students to see what happens once they're in.
Awesome. All right, I think we are good to wrap up here. Ryan, I know you have one last thing to say. So we are ready, and then we're looking forward to seeing you all next week.
Thanks, Maura, and thanks, Dan and Maddie and Magnus as well. I just want to say this event is one of our favorite events of the year. It is impactful. Your participation is the only way this event works. So I'm asking on behalf of my colleagues who have poured blood, sweat, and tears, and I promise I've seen all 3 of those things this week in preparation to make this event special and right for you and for our legislative friends. Please, please do not cancel. Please, we've got you set up with legislators. They will have your name. They will be expecting you. Cancellations really cause a domino effect in the schedule and really disrupt things. Obviously, people get sick, kids get sick, roads get closed, all of the things. So you're humans, and we grant you that grace that we ask of you for us. But if you wake up that day and you're just like, am I into this or not? Please make the answer be yes, I'm into this, because your presence not only is important philosophically and mission-based wise, infrastructure wise, your presence is really important as well. So please, please, please don't cancel on us. If you have problems the day of or really do need to cancel, please give us a call and let us know as soon as possible. It allows us to try to fix things. But at the end of the day, please, please, please don't cancel. We need you there. Thanks. I look forward to seeing you all. I look forward to celebrating this great work with you all next week. Have a great rest of your week and weekend, and get ready to make some difference in Lansing. Thanks all.